Great turnout for this bright and early Monday morning, afternoon, depending on what time zone you're in. Welcome, glad to have you. My name is Casey Given. I am the executive director of Young Voices, and we are very pleased to host our first Young Voices Forum in a while. This is a series that we started during the pandemic of virtual briefings where we bring in various speakers to talk about recent projects and books they've released. And we are so pleased to have Mr. Corey DeAngelis here to talk about his latest book. We'll have more of these forums in the future, so more to look forward to. But we are very excited to have Corey joining us for our first of the summer. I will introduce Corey briefly, but just a few housekeeping notes. If you can keep yourself muted during the conversation, there will be time for Q&A in the end. So if you're interested, you can raise your hand near the end and we'll call on you to unmute your mic and ask a question. We also encourage the use of the chat box. So if you have a question, you want to get it out before you forget it, type it in the chat box. I will read all of the questions in the chat box there during Q&A. And if you need to clarify too or add to that, we can also call on you there. Yeah, this meeting will be recorded for posterity, so we'll put it up on our website afterwards for those who can't join. But we are so excited to have you, Corey. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, let me start out by introducing Corey. Corey DeAngelis is a senior fellow at the American Federation for Children and a visiting fellow at Stanford University's Hoover Institution. He has been labeled as the school choice evangelist and called the most effective school choice advocate since Milton Friedman. He is a regular on Fox News and frequently appears in the Wall Street Journal. DeAngels is also the executive director at the Educational Freedom Initiative, a senior fellow at the Reason Foundation, and an adjunct scholar at the Cato Institute, and a board member at the Liberty Justice Center. Lots of cool titles. He holds a PhD in education policy from the University of Arkansas. He is the author of The Parent Revolution, Rescuing Your Kids from Radicals Ruining Our Schools, which is what we are here to talk about today. Corey, first of all, welcome. Congratulations on the publication.
Thank you.
Before we jump into it, so we obviously just read about your professional background, but I'm interested in kind of your personal background. Where are you from originally? And I feel like I like to ask a school choice advocate, like, how was your K-12 experience and what got you interested in school choice?
Well, I went to government schools all through K through 12 education. So if I make any mistakes today, that's probably why. And that's why my handwriting's so horrible. I don't know if you guys saw when I wrote the dedication to Randy Weingarten, who's the head of the teachers union, for overplaying her hand and awakening, sparking the parent revolution. I wrote a note to her at the beginning, and I posted it on Twitter, and people were making fun of my handwriting, but it's because I went to government schools. You can't blame me. And I can't say it's because I'm a doctor either. I'm not a real doctor. I'm more like a Jill Biden doctor. But anyway, I grew up in San Antonio, Texas. I live here now. I was in DC for like 6 years doing think tank stuff. And, I figured I work from home anyway, so I might as well move back to San Antonio, Texas. It's a great place, the land of the free. We're pretty close on the cusp to education freedom in Texas. We took out 14 guys in the primaries for the first time in history. Texas has the votes in the House for universal school choice. So that'll be the next government school monopoly domino to fall next year. But I went to government schools all K through 12. I had a pretty bad experience until I got to high school. In high school, I was able to attend something called a magnet school. Magnet schools are still district-run schools run by the government, but you're not assigned to them. So they don't have as much monopoly power. They can have selective admissions. They can have a specialized mission. Mine was in communications. And it was actually on the campus of my residentially assigned government school. And so I was able to see night and day difference for 4 years each day, that there was disorder in the classroom in the assigned school. There was just low expectations in the government school. There's fighting. I mean, in my middle school, the kids played a game called 10 Seconds. I don't know if anybody in here knows what that game is, but For some reason, none of my audiences have ever heard of this game 10 seconds, but at my middle school, people would fight each other for 10 seconds. And then the third party would tell you to stop after 10 seconds. And there was drugs, gang activity. People would get what they called rolled into the gangs in bathrooms. If you got beat up in the bathroom, that was your initiation into the gang. And so I have a kind of firsthand experience with school choice myself. I think other families should have education options too, but it shouldn't be limited to schools that are run by the government. You should be able to take your kids' education dollars that are funded by the taxpayer to the public, which I call government-run schools, charter school, private school, or home-based education option. The money should follow the child. And guess what? 12 states, red states, have already passed universal school choice. Milton Friedman's vision finally coming to fruition right before our very eyes. And it's the teachers union's own dang fault. And so that's why I dedicated the book to Randy and her union lackeys, because they overplayed their hand. They fought to keep the schools closed. They lobbied the CDC to do so. They were fear-mongering every step of the way. They were threatening to strike in 2020. They were calling Trump's plan to reopen schools, quote, reckless, callous, and cruel. You had the Chicago Teachers Union, had a board member, total hypocrite, vacationing in Puerto Rico in person while saying that they couldn't go back to work. Thousands of miles away. It was safe enough to do that, but it wasn't safe enough to go back to work, apparently. They were also deleting tweets saying, quote, the push to reopen schools is rooted in sexism, racism, and misogyny. They threw every buzzword at the wall to see what would stick, but it just goes to show you how low they would stoop. I mean, if anybody from the calls from California and Los Angeles, they had a plan to reopen schools. They called for more money, obviously, but the unions also included in that plan Medicare for all, a wealth tax, police-free schools, and a ban on charter schools. None of that had anything to do with opening schools. And so, Casey, this is probably, I'm probably getting ahead of my skis a little bit beyond your question, but yeah, thank you.
No, absolutely. I love the energy. So that's a great way to kick off the conversation. So I'm interested, you mentioned Milton Friedman. Maybe can you give the audience just a little sense of the history of school choice? Because it kind of started with an idea for many decades from what I understand, but it's only been the past few decades and years that we've seen some major progress. Could you tell them about that?
Yeah, a lot of people trace the modern school choice movement back to Milton Friedman's 1955 essay, The Role of Government in Education, and then the first kind of modern voucher program that actually is enacted. A lot of people trace it back to Milwaukee in 1990. And actually, I could have answered the first question this way too, but my first study linked that Milwaukee voucher program when I was at the University of Arkansas doing my PhD to a long-term outcome, which was a reduction in crime. It wasn't a random assignment evaluation. It wasn't gold standard, but it was pretty dang close. We had pretty sophisticated matching methodologies. We were able to see whether the kid was in a two-parent household or not, their race, income, gender, all the usual background characteristics that we controlled for, finding a long-term reduction in crime. And so that kind of was, I started as a researcher before getting into full-blown advocacy. I figured out that the university system would be going against the grain too much and fighting an uphill battle. I would be punished for my views in the university system, where I've been rewarded for my views in the private sector and think tanks. But anyway, even before Milwaukee, you know, we had voucher programs in the late 1800s in states like Maine and Vermont. These actually still exist. These are blue states now. And it's an example I point to when people try to say, oh, well, we're in Texas, we can't have school choice because we have rural areas. I mean, that's the main excuse you hear in red states. They can't use the usual lefty talking points against school choice in red states. So they know they have to come up with something else. There's a few that they use, but in my home state of Texas in particular, they say, oh, we have rural areas. Well, guess what? All the other states with school choice, Florida included, Arizona, they have rural areas too, and their representatives vote for school choice. It wasn't a problem there. But even if you go back to Maine and Vermont, the reason they created these programs was specifically for students who lived in rural areas that were so rural, they didn't have any public schools. And so the state figured out over 150 years ago in those places that not having a lot of opportunities was an argument to expand choices, not to restrict them. And so they gave vouchers to parents to go to other public schools, government schools, or to private religious or non-religious schools. The money followed the child. And those programs are still on the books today. We actually had a recent Supreme Court victory out of Maine regarding their program, Carson v. Macon. We're winning so much, I'm almost getting tired of winning, Casey. But no, I'm just kidding. We're not there yet. We haven't gotten California or New York yet. And I could talk a little bit later about how we might get school choice into bluer states in the medium to long term, or even in the short run. But right now it's a red state parent revolution. You fast forward past Milwaukee, we didn't have any universal school choice programs before 2020, before COVID. Now we have 12. We've had more expansion on school choice in the past 3 years than we've had in the preceding 3 decades. So it's hard to overstate how much advancement's actually happening on the issue. And we do have one state that wasn't a GOP trifecta that passed universal school choice, and that was North Carolina. They're the 10th state to do so. And North Carolina has a Democrat governor. They have a Republican-controlled legislature. But that's not because Roy Cooper went along with the issue. He's a hypocrite. He sent his kid to private school. He opposes school choice for others. If you go to the North Carolina governor official government website, I think it's still there. You'll have to double check me on this, but like a week ago, it still was. It's all in big red at the top, a declaration of emergency by Roy Cooper, the Democrat governor of North Carolina. Was it a declaration of emergency because of a hurricane or a natural disaster? No, nothing like that. It was a declaration of emergency over school choice. He basically threw a temper tantrum, started stomping his feet once he knew that the Republicans had enough votes to pass their universal school choice bill and override a veto from him. They have 60% control of each chamber, which is just enough votes. And that happened after a Democrat, actually, Tricia Cotham, switched parties on the issue and became the lead bill sponsor for universal school choice last year in 2023. So that's a little bit of the history. Universal is more of a new thing, but that's how it ought to be. I am an unapologetic advocate for universal because we don't restrict access to government schools on the basis of income. We shouldn't restrict access to school choice on the basis of income. And at the end of the day, politics is all about organized interests for pushing for what they want. And if you have a broader coalition benefiting from the policy, you're more likely to keep it going and expanding in the future. I mean, one of the places we've actually gone backwards on school choice this past couple of years was Illinois, a blue state. They had a low-income scholarship program that was targeted, means tested. First of all, I think that's a form of playing winners and picking winners and losers. That, look, we're all paying into the system. We should at least get the average amount back. The higher income people, if anything, are paying more into the system than others. But the program was sunsetted. The Democrats did not lift a finger to save it, even though J.B. Pritzker, the governor out there, told the Chicago Tribune last year that if a bill got to his desk to save the program, he'd sign it, which is a total 180 on his rhetoric on the issue. In 2017, when he was first running, he vowed to eliminate that program that was started by a Republican governor. And then for him to do a total 180 and start to kind of pretend that he supports school choice and he probably knew the bill would never get to his desk. He probably knew that he probably talked to House and Senate leadership, and they're all hypocrites on the issue. They all sent their kids to private school. But part of the story, in my view, is that because it was all low-income families, they were less likely to organize and push back and be politically advantaged enough to have as much of an impact on legislators keeping the program around. Look at Arizona, on the other hand. Arizona, they had an initiative by the teachers union groups out there in 2022, trying to put it on the ballot to get another bite at the apple to get rid of school choice. They already had about 10,000 families benefiting from the program before they went full-blown universal. But they had a whole bunch of different categories of families. It wasn't restricted based on income. It was based on, if you had a special needs kid, if you had a military family, and about 20% of the population was already eligible in Arizona before they went to 100% in 2022. But when the teachers unions tried to put it on the ballot, they didn't get nearly enough signatures to refer it to the ballot. And we all thought that they were going to get the signatures. They had enough money to do so. They had enough people to do so. And they lied about how many signatures they had, by the way. I don't know if you guys remember this, but they said they had like 150,000 signatures. They only had like 90,000 signatures. And I think they were lying because they had an incentive to do so. I don't like to imply bad motives of people, but if they were able to keep the kids past count day, counts based on, public schools are funded based on the number of students you have enrolled, they would get more money for keeping the kids there if they kept them past that day. And then also, if they could delay the implementation of the expansion of the program past the start of the school year, while parents, once you commit to a school at the beginning of the school year, you're probably just going to stay there. And so they probably knew that. The only other explanation is they're so stupid that they were 60, 70% off their number in estimating how many signatures that they had. That could be the case. Maybe they were doing Common Core math. I don't know. Either way, I don't want you teaching my kids. And that's a good argument for school choice. But they had a lot of different families from a whole host of different backgrounds benefiting from the program. They showed up at the signature gathering locations, informed voters of the facts. And I think that was the parents basically became a new special interest group. And that's part of the point of the book, The Parent Revolution, is that it should be a story of optimism, that if people band together, they can become a political juggernaut. And parents have done that over the past few years, and they're holding politicians at the ballot box like they did in my home state in Texas.
Yeah, why don't we get into that, the parent revolution? So did this kick off during COVID? Like how do you trace particularly the pandemic or afterwards? Like what are some of the motivating factors you think for parents to take action, and what have we seen just in the past few years?
One sec, Casey, my ears turned off because I took one off of my.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I can hear you now. But basically, I heard the first few words, and did it start during COVID was basically the question, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So the book starts with COVID too, that the teachers unions overplayed their hand. They did a lot of stupid stuff. I mean, COVID was just a period of lunacy and things that just didn't make sense. I was living in DC at the time during COVID, and I don't know if this happened in y'all states, but COVID was a weird virus. Like when you would go to dinner, COVID would only like happen up here, because when you'd walk to where you want to eat, to your table, you had to have your mask on because COVID was up here. But once you sat down, you're like, all right, it's safe now. I see you up there, but I'm going to take my mask off now. It's fine. But no, in Sacramento County, I was actually born in Sacramento. Not a lot of people know this because my dad was in the Air Force. We left and I moved to San Antonio by the time I was 4. But in Sacramento, they had a stupid health order that had nothing to do with health and had nothing to do with safety. It had everything to do with power and control. The health order arbitrarily closed schools, but not daycares, because COVID was smart. It knew if you were learning something, then it was going to get you, it would activate. But if you were sitting there in the same building, twiddling your thumbs and not learning a dang thing, then somehow it was safe. But anyway, there was a private school out there in Sacramento, realized how ridiculous this was, and they rebranded themselves as a daycare. Aha! They figured, oh, yeah, we know we were in the schooling business before, but oh yeah, we understand how dangerous that is. We're going to call ourselves a daycare now. And they retrained all their employees as daycare workers. And so that just goes to show you, I mean, that's just one example. There's tons of examples in the book that whenever the private schools were shut down by the government, they sued for the right to reopen. When the government schools were closed, they celebrated, and any insistence that they go back to work, they'd flood the streets with fake coffins, tombstones. In DC, where I was, they put fake body bags outside the public school offices. In Florida, a lot of people are like, oh, well, the public schools open in Florida. Well, that's despite the best efforts of the unions. They were driving around the school official buildings with a hearse. The Miami Teachers Union used a hearse in their caravan, and they had a picture of Ron DeSantis on the front, picture of Corcoran, I believe, on the back of the hearse as well, to imply that if you send us back to work, you're actually trying to kill us. No other profession did this. The private schools didn't do this. They were open in the same city. And I don't blame the people so much as I blame the incentives that are baked into the system. It's not just that they could get the same job security and pay by not going to work. It was worse than that. They figured out they could profit from keeping the schools closed. The teachers' unions held children's education hostage to secure billions of dollars in ransom payments from taxpayers. They did it. They got $190 billion in so-called COVID relief since March of 2020. In places like Chicago, they got like $8 billion, and they were striking in 2022. 2 weeks to slow the spread turned into 2 years to flatten a generation. And so they were, look, before forever, they always said, if we get low test scores, and they do get low test scores in some places. In Baltimore, you have 40% of their high schools with 0% math proficiency rates. In Chicago or in Illinois, they have over 60 schools with 0% math proficiency rates. It's absolutely ridiculous. And they've always said, well, it's because we don't have enough money. And that's the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again. But when it came to reopenings, they pulled the same trick. They said, it's because we don't have enough money. Pay us some more, put us at the front of the vaccination lines. And then they moved the goalpost every step of the way. They still continued to change the conversation. And then and they're just trying to rewrite history on the issue. That's why in the book, I felt it's so important to keep miles and miles of receipts to not allow them to rewrite history, because you had Randy Weingarten going in front of Congress like a year ago, and she was gaslighting the American public. She didn't just say that, she didn't try to defend her actions or anything. She leaned into it and said, well, we were actually fighting to reopen the schools starting in April of 2020. What? Yeah, and then she pinned her tweet on Twitter saying the Republicans are lying. We actually wanted to open the schools. If you're trying so hard to open them, why weren't they open? And why were the private schools able to figure it out? Why were the grocery stores able to figure it out? Why were your members vacationing in Mexico and Puerto Rico? And in Los Angeles, they had their private teachers union group. They were instructed, if you're going to go to Mexico and Cancun and vacation, that's fine, but make sure you don't post about it on social media, because they saw what happened to the Chicago Teachers Union board member that was exposed for her hypocrisy. Talking about hypocrisy, Gavin Newsom had some as well. We all remember his French Laundry stuff and his hypocrisy there. But he also, most recently, he moved to Marin County to send his kid to a $60,000 a year private school. Hypocrisy there. But also during COVID, he was complaining on the news about Zoom school, saying it was so hard for his kids to do the online school. Come to find out, right after that, we all figured out that he sent all of his kids to in-person private school. Total hypocrite, trying to seem like he's part of the people while he's fighting to keep the schools closed. Anyway, all that to say, with the school closures, parents got to see a little bit what was happening in the classroom. And so they saw that the schools were focused more on indoctrination than education. Some people tried to respond to this problem by going to the school board meeting. And that's I don't blame them for that. I think it's a one-size-fits-all disaster that it's never going to change from the top down. It has to be from the bottom up through people voting with their feet. But people were told all along that, the public schools have democratic accountability. We'll listen to you. And we saw how that worked out. We showed up at the school board meeting. They cut off our mics. They even tried to label parents as domestic terrorists. You had the National School Boards Association. Under the Patriot Act of all things, they implied in a letter that they sent to the Biden administration that parents, for having the audacity to show up to do what they were told to do, to show up and talk about what they wanted, they implied that parents should be investigated for quote unquote domestic terrorism. And in fact, there was an FBI threat tag specifically designed for parents that was created for parents protesting at school board meetings. A lot of people remember that. And by the way, 26 states have left the NSBA after that. So play stupid games, win stupid prizes. The parents held them accountable by making such a stink about it. And a lot of people don't remember is that there was a FOIA request, and people uncovered that an earlier draft of that same letter actually called for the military to be deployed and the National Guard to be deployed to school board meetings to tell parents to sit down and shut up. That didn't make it into the final draft, but they actually had a previous draft, you can look it up, calling for the military to be deployed to school board meetings. It's insane how much authoritarian overreach they tried to employ just because parents disagreed with how they wanted to raise their kids. And I'm speaking to you guys today. I'm not going to take a stance on whether we should have this curriculum or that curriculum. I'm more libertarian in that I think the bigger question is whether who decides for other people's kids. I think parents should decide for their own kids how they raise their own children. And if you want to send your kid to a school with a left-leaning curriculum, I'm fine with that. But a lot of families are seeing in the public schools there's a misalignment, especially among conservatives. And that's probably why we're seeing so much traction in red states right now. It's become a GOP litmus test issue to support school choice. But it's also the reason why we haven't seen as much blue state advancement as we'd like, as you all know, is because the Party is a wholly owned subsidiary of the teachers' unions. Randy Weingarten's union funnels all of their money to Democrat campaign coffers every single election cycle. In 2022, 99.97% of her campaign contributions from AFT, Randy Weingarten's union, went to Democrats. It's a money laundering operation. It ought to be illegal. But at the same time, people in power like Randy and Becky are only helping our cause. I don't know if you saw Becky's viral video the other day, man, at their annual conference. Well, another part of that is they had a union within their union striking against the union. It's you can't make this stuff up. They had to stop the conference and everything because a faction within their union was striking outside of their conference in Philadelphia. But Becky pulled the Dwight Schrute. She was hitting her fist on the table. And man, talk about free advertising for homeschooling and school choice. And at the end of the speech, she talks about how they got to have all the things. And we're like, what are those things? Is it math, reading, and writing? Obviously not. No, they want more money and they want to control the minds of other people's children. But she just repeated it. We got to have all the things like 10 times instead of listing the things that they need. But it just goes to show you this is it's a cult in some ways. And because you had the people in the audience just cheering her on. They were eating it out of her hand. And the rest of society, the rest of the country saw that and was like, this is ridiculous. Let's play this on repeat.
Great. So we've touched upon some of so school choice is kind of a broad category, right, of specific policies. So you've kind of touched on your mark so far about like charter schools, magnets, vouchers, which I assume most of the audience is familiar with. So since the parent revolution, the concept of universal school choice has been picking up. So can you talk about what that is? And also, are there any other kind of new innovations that are picking up steam, like educational savings accounts or stuff like that?
Yeah, I'll go over that in a second. Can you hear this?
Because our students are depending on us to win all the things. Anyway, we have to win.
Anyway, go check it out if you haven't seen it already. But different types of school choice. Look, we've kind of moved the conversation from vouchers, which is kind of the Friedman idea, where you get a voucher that the money that would have followed you to the government school. You could still take it there. If you like your public school, Casey, you can keep your public school, but for real this time, unlike with your doctor. But if not, you can take that voucher to pay, and it's typically a fraction of what would have been spent in the government schools. In the US, we spend about $20,000 per kid per year in the government schools. It's typically just the state portion that follows the child, and on average, that's about half of the total, which is, look, schools are funded based on local, state, and federal levels. Typically, about half is the state level. That's the amount that follows the child, or a portion of it. Sometimes the bills will say like 80 to 90% of the state level, which anyway. And that money could follow you to a private school if you want to pay for tuition and fees. Milton Friedman later on in his life talked about a multi-use voucher. And this is kind of the idea of the education savings account in practice, where you don't have to just use it for private school tuition and fees, because schooling is just one way to achieve an education. And so with education savings accounts, kind of like health savings accounts, you can use the funding on any approved health expenditure. With HSAs, with ESAs, you can use it for any approved education expenditure. You can't go use the money on drugs. It has to be education broadly defined. And so the money that would have followed you to the government school, again, you could still take it there. But if not, goes into the ESA that can be directed by the parent. You could use it for private school tuition and fees, just like a voucher, but you could also use it for home-based education, curriculum, private tutoring, special needs educational therapies, textbooks, so on and so forth. And depends on the state, but sometimes you can use it for transportation to get to the school as well. And another benefit of the ESA, so one benefit is that it allows maximum customization for the family. It's the kind of the purest concept of the money following the child. But it also, I would argue, makes it more defensible from a legal standpoint as well, because some state constitutions will say, that they have Blaine amendments, which I think they've been dealt a mortal blow from the Carson case and the Espinoza case in 2020. But they're basically anti-Catholic amendments that were introduced a long time ago, adopted in about 30 state constitutions that say that, that education funding can't be directed to religious institutions, and they can't be directly directed to religious institutions. Says something along those lines. But with ESAs, you can make the case that it's an indirect beneficiary is the religious school, because the money is first going to the family. It's going into a savings account, and then they can choose among a whole host of different providers, whether they're religious or non-religious. And we win in the courts over and over again on this issue. But I'd say that even with vouchers, because you can still make the argument that the parents are the ones directing the voucher funding, even if it goes directly from the state to a school, it's still being chosen. The path is being chosen by the parent. But anyway, that's kind of the new frontier is education savings accounts. And I would say that this is my preferred policy, but vouchers are still good. There's tax credit scholarships, so it's just privately funded. The unions will still call them vouchers, but like in Illinois, that low income program that I talked about earlier, that was a tax credit scholarship. Florida started out as a tax credit scholarship too. And basically individuals and corporations can donate to scholarship granting organizations within your state. And then families can go to those scholarship granting organizations to get the scholarships to go to private schools. And the people who donate get a tax benefit for doing so. So there's an incentive to do that. The enemies of school choice will say, well, that money should have went to the government, so it's public money anyway. But anyway, first of all, there's no such thing as public dollars. They're taxpayer dollars. But then two, they're private dollars. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled in ACSTO v. Wynn 2011 or around there that private dollars remain private, quote, until they enter the tax collector's hands. So these are private dollars still, but that's another way to structure it. I would say with the tax credit, you're going to have it's less likely to be scalable because it relies on voluntary donations. Whereas with a voucher or ESA that's funded with taxpayer dollars, that's money that's already being spent and it's just being redirected. So you can scale it. Like in Arizona, they have full-throated school choice in Arizona. I'd say the best states are Arizona and Florida, but Arizona, for example, they now have about 80,000 families benefiting from school choice. In 2021, they only had about 10,000. They actually broke the government website when they opened the applications in 2022 because so many families were applying. First, I didn't know if it was because it was a government website. Like, was it because they just couldn't figure it out? But it was actually also because so many families were applying for the scholarships. And so I forget where I was going on the Arizona point, but we can continue.
Great. Awesome. Well, I have a bunch more questions, but I want to open it up to the audience. So if you can drop your questions in the chat here, or also use the raised hand question function if you want to call on you.
One sec, Casey. Yeah, so Arizona, what I was trying to point out was it's scalable. It's a publicly funded or taxpayer funded program. It's the money that would have been spent in the government schools. It's not a tax credit. And they do have a tax credit too in Arizona. So these aren't mutually exclusive either. But if all 1 million so on students wanted to use the program in Arizona, they could. Whereas in states like Utah, they technically went universal in that everybody can apply for the funding. But they started their program out in 2023 with only 5,000 scholarships as a cap. And so what happened? Well, when they opened the applications, you had tens of thousands of families applying. So the legislature had to go back and expand the cap from like 5,000 to 10,000. Fast forward to today, I think they have like tens of thousands of families still on wait lists in Utah. So when I say 12 states have gone universal, there's still work to be done in those states. Yes, everybody's eligible, but it's kind of a first come, first served thing where if you're not the first 5,000 in Utah, at least when it first started, good luck. And then legislators would have to go back to the floor to vote on another bill, which but this happened in North Carolina too. They just went universal last year, and they have tens of thousands of families on wait list in North Carolina too.
Awesome. Well, we have some questions in the chat. Well, first of all, I should say it seems like a number of people who attended magnet school, so it's kind of cool to see the results of school choice in the room here. The first question is from Shizi, asking, how can we promote school choice while ensuring a social safety net and K through 12 education? My interpretation of that is it seems like this is a common argument against school choice, at least from public school teachers, is that, oh, school choice is only accessible to middle class or wealthy families. Is that a myth?
Yeah, it's a myth. And, I was asked this during my book launch at Heritage on May 15th. Someone asked, well, a long time ago, school choice only benefited low income. Now it's benefiting everyone. And I responded, so what, or good, or something like that, because we shouldn't be picking winners and losers. Everybody should have access to that funding to take to the school that works best for them. But to get to the heart of the question, competition is a rising tide that lifts all boats. We have 29 studies on this subject nationwide. 26 of them find positive effects, more school choice, better outcomes in public schools. And so even if you don't use school choice programs directly, you can still benefit. And guess what? Even if higher income families can use it too, this still disproportionately benefits lower income families who are stuck in the most objectively failing government-run institutions that they're assigned to. So school choice, I would argue, is an equalizer, even if it's universal in nature. One, you want it to be universal so you can keep the program going, so it's not on the chopping block, because you'll have more people fighting to keep it around. And I think this is part of the story in Florida and why DeSantis won in 2018. It was politically beneficial to do so even before COVID. The headline in the Wall Street Journal after DeSantis barely won in 2018, a lot of people thought his opponent, Andrew Gillum, the Democrat, was going to win. DeSantis squeaked by a fraction of a point, and the headline in the Wall Street Journal the next day was that school choice moms tipped the governor's race in Florida. They were looking at CNN exit polling, of all places, finding that Black moms in particular came out in force for DeSantis, much higher than expected. And the story is that families who might have disagreed with DeSantis on a lot of other issues made this a single issue vote for them because his opponent, Andrew Gillum, he was a Black Democrat, called to get rid of the program for school choice that was benefiting over 100,000 kids at the time. That was actually disproportionately low-income kids, disproportionately non-white kids. And look, when you're a family and you might disagree with DeSantis on things that, that might not matter all as much directly to your kids, they went to the ballot box with the idea that they want to keep their kid in a better educational environment to get a better future for their child. And so that's part of the problem with school choice. I mean, historically at least, and it's almost a chicken and the egg problem. Before you pass it, there's not like this entrenched benefit. I mean, maybe there's a lot of harm in the public school and you're trying to get away from that. But when parents get school choice, they fight really hard to keep it. And so they basically become a new special interest group. I'd say more of a general interest. You're fighting for your own kids as opposed to fighting to control the system overall. But as far as the social safety net, look, I mean, we have that. So like when you pass school choice, you're not getting rid of the public school system. If you like your public school, you can keep it. In fact, it does get better. And also, I mentioned earlier, this is more of a technical point, but it's only the state funding that follows the child. So what does that mean? The federal and local funding stay in the government-run school. They actually financially benefit on a per-student basis. Their per-student funding is going to increase mathematically as a result of school choice in the public schools. If you spent $15,000 before, you have enough kids using school choice, you might get up to $16,000, $17,000 a year without even changing the funding streams. because on a per student basis, you're keeping thousands of dollars for students who are no longer there. And just imagine if you stopped shopping at Walmart and you wanted to go to Kroger or Safeway, Trader Joe's, and Walmart got to keep half of your grocery funding each week. That wouldn't make a lot of sense, but that's how politics works sometime. And I would argue this is a good deal for the public schools that they get to keep any money at all for students who are no longer there.
Great. We have two questions that are more or less very similar, so I'll just lump them together. And it's a good segue from the last point you made. Is, what do you think the root of resistance to school choice comes from? Especially mentioning that funding part. It seems like at least financially, there's not too much of a motivation if they're keeping part of that per capita funding. So what's happening here?
Yeah, well, they want a monopoly on funding. They don't want just a partial monopoly. They don't want to keep half. They want to keep 100% of the money. So even if they're not educating your kids, they'd rather have your kid there and kind of twiddle their thumbs and not teach them how to read and write. But they still want to keep the funding, 100% of the funding associated with that kid. So I think it's partially that. The main opposition to school choice, the reason you have Democrat elected officials voting against it is what I mentioned earlier, that they are basically, and the unions are an arm of the Democrat Party. The money's extorted from taxpayers. It goes to the government school system directed by the Democrats, and then it goes to the teachers unions that refunnel that money back to the Democrat campaign coffers. It's a money laundering operation, whatever you want to call it. It's slimy, and that's the only reason why. You can make left and right leaning arguments for school choice. Yeah, we know the libertarian arguments about it being, a competition, rising tide that lifts all boats. You can make the right leaning arguments for it helping you achieve schools that are aligned with your values. And you can make the arguments that it's an equalizer. And if the left was real about their definition of systemic racism, they'd apply that same energy to the government-run school system, where you have disproportionate outcomes based on income, based on race. And it's because we're assigned to schools just based on where we live. In no other industry does it work that way. Imagine if you were assigned to your grocery store just based on where you lived, and they started serving you poisoned food, and you're having problems with food poisoning every day, every week. And the government grocery stores had empty shelves like we see in socialist countries. And the only recourse you had was to go complain to the grocery board and say, oh, you guys aren't providing what you should be providing. And then they'd say, oh, well, you just need to give us more money. We'll promise we'll do a better job next time. Or you had to move houses. Imagine if you had to move houses to get access to a better grocery store. Even if you had the money to do so, that is a total pain in the ass. And so that provides a substantial amount of monopoly power that would provide substantial monopoly power to the restaurant or grocery store that did that. It also does so it goes with the government school system today. It has everything to do with power, nothing to do with logic. And so sometimes the simplest explanation is the best explanation, that it has all to do with the Democrats who are controlled by the teachers unions. There are some that aren't. Look, I don't want to paint with too broad a brush, but you had in Louisiana this year, they passed universal school choice, the 12th state to do so. 20% of their House Democrats voted for full-throated school choice in Louisiana House. And so that's good. I'll take any bipartisan support we can get. And one guy in particular, Jason Hughes, a hero on the issue, he just told it like it was on the House floor, saying, I don't need this $13,000 job bad enough to turn my back on kids who are stuck in failing schools. And so sometimes, every once in a while, you'll get some Democrats who will cross the party lines. It's just politically risky for them to do so at the moment because of that stranglehold that the teachers unions have over the Democrat Party. But if all the Democrats banded together and gave the middle finger to the teachers unions would have, where else are they going to go? They're not going to go to the Republicans. They already don't control enough of the Republicans. They'd have to actually switch their priorities and think about maybe actually helping their members as opposed to controlling the education of everybody else's kids, regardless of their choice. So I'm hopeful that we'll have some more bipartisan support in the future. In the book, in chapter 4, I outlined something I call bipartisanship through hyperpartisanship. What do I mean by that? It might sound counterintuitive, but it's the main point of the book. that the way that we can get to more bipartisan support on school choice is not by pretending that it's bipartisan. Yes, we should use the left and right-leaning arguments for it, but that's not going to, it hasn't translated to the votes from both parties that we've wanted. The way that you get there is through political incentives. And the way that you get there is that the more that the GOP leans into parental rights as a political winner, the more it becomes a form of political suicide for Democrats to oppose it. But you have to have one party, I don't care which one it is, lead on an issue for the other one to lose votes on the issue. And so the first movers in this case have been the Republicans. And we saw this with Glenn Youngkin in Virginia in 2021. He basically, Terry McAuliffe, the Democrat, former governor in a state that went 10 points to Biden the year before, he said on the final debate, I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach. Glenn Youngkin leaned into that and put the ads on repeat until election night. And by the way, the night before the election, Terry McAuliffe had Randy Weingarten stumping for him. The school closer was his campaign closer. Bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it worked out for him. It didn't work out for him. He lost by 6 points with education voters to Youngkin, a Republican winning on education. That was basically unheard of before. Fast forward to today, the latest polling I've seen on the issue shows Trump and Biden tied on the issue of education. But since, the Glenn Youngkin thing, we had Josh Shapiro, who, by the way, Josh Shapiro had a great statement the other day in related to the assassination attempt on Trump. But Josh Shapiro, look, he's horrible in a lot of ways. That was a great statement by him the other day. But on school choice in 2022, he included private school choice in his education platform right before the election. He ultimately caved to the teachers union, didn't really lift a finger to pass school choice. But even he went on Fox News last year saying he did support school choice still. February of this year, he reiterated his support for school choice. And I think what happened was he saw what was going on in Virginia. Terry McAuliffe was up by double digits in the polls, and he ultimately lost on the issue of education. Josh Shapiro might have said, I don't want to become a Terry McAuliffe. And this was conveniently right after Doug Mastriano, the Trump-endorsed candidate, started calling Josh a hypocrite on school choice. He said, look, you went to private school. I support school choice. Why don't you? Right after that, Josh Shapiro included private school choice in his platform. So he was able to take away that argument from Doug Mastriano. And whether it was a true change of heart or he was reading the tea leaves, we don't know. I have a theory about which one it is, but it reminded me of a quote by Milton Friedman, which is one of his best quotes. He said that the way that you change things is not by getting the right people into office. That helps, obviously, if they vote for the right policies. But in the long run, Milton Friedman said, the way that you truly change things is by creating a climate of opinion where it becomes politically profitable for the wrong people to do the right thing. And so I think that's how we get to bipartisan universal school choice in the future. It's going to be because of political incentives, not because we're making people feel good about things.
Great. Next question from Aaron Andrews. What would you say to a person who was afraid universal school choice could end up hurting private schools' autonomy? Do you think there will ever be strings attached to the public funds that follow the child?
Yeah, so I won a debate on this in New York City. There was like 100 people in the audience. So apparently all 100 libertarians showed up in New York City, showed up to the debate. But it was with Stefan Kinsella. He's a smart guy, libertarian lawyer. And he took the anti-school choice position on account of it being, with government shekels comes government shackles. I took the position of, and we did it Oxford style. I ended up winning the debate. You can go check it out. It was a Soho Forum debate. So if you look up DeAngels Kinsella debate, you'll find it. But my main argument was, look, we can't make perfect the enemy of the good. We have to take any incremental W we can get, because if we don't, we'll be stuck with the L. And as I said earlier, politics is all about organized interests fighting for what they want. If you have more people benefiting from private and home education through school choice, you're less likely to get authoritarian overreach in the future, because whether we like it or not, you can get the shackles without the shekels. The government can already regulate private and home education if they wanted to, and they have historically. Think about in Oregon, they outlawed private education altogether. You had to send your kids to Caesar. You couldn't direct the upbringing of your children. And so was that because of a school choice program? No, they didn't have any school choice. You look at New York today, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, they have the worst homeschooling laws on the books. They have no private school choice. On the other hand, you look at states that have more freedom in education when it comes to school choice, they tend to have more homeschooling autonomy at the same time. Look at Oklahoma, Iowa, they have universal school choice and the best homeschooling laws on the books. In fact, in Ohio last year, they passed universal school choice the same session that they passed a bill to deregulate homeschooling. So this is more about who's in charge as opposed to school choice causing regulation in the private sector. But at the end of the day, this is all voluntary too. If people should be able to make their own cost benefit decisions for their own kids, there have never been a school choice program that says you must take the money, whether you like it or not. Families are smart enough to say, if there's a regulation tied to it, I'm not going to take the money. But you shouldn't tell other families that are low income that they shouldn't have that opportunity, because the alternative is that they're stuck in a fully controlled government school that might indoctrinate them to vote to regulate homeschooling in the future. Because look, whether we like it or not, we have 50 million kids going through the government school system each year for 13 years of their lives for 7 hours a day, where they learn that big government is the solution to all their problems. Those kids are going to turn out of that system to vote to regulate private and home education in the future, unless we have school choice. I think that's the best opportunity we have to fight back. Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty, and it is no different in the school choice battle. And not all school choice bills are created equal. I will say, like Arizona is the best, and they aren't the same over time too. So like when you have more people signed up, you might be able to deregulate in the future. So in Arizona, for example, when they first started, they had a testing requirement. I still think, look, take the win. It's an incremental victory, even if they have some testing. I think it was a nationally norm reference test. You could pick your test. You don't have to take the state test. But over time, as more people signed up, they lobbied the legislature to get rid of the testing requirement. So now in Arizona, it's like the most light touch program we have out there. All they have is a random audit to make sure you're spending the money on education as opposed to drugs or whatever it may be. But there's no testing requirement in Arizona anymore. And so I would argue that even if it's not perfect when it starts, you could, if you had more people sign up, you could create more political pressure for people in the legislature to deregulate it. So anyway, that's a long-winded answer to what should be a simple question, but there's a lot of libertarians on the call, so you might want to spend extra time on it. But also, Randy Weingarten's repeated the same argument. Is she saying it because she's a libertarian anti-government type? No, Randy Weingarten wants to keep her gravy train going. And if you're on Randy Weingarten's side and not my side or Milton Friedman's side, you're probably on the wrong side, and you might be overthinking things, which we do a lot as libertarians. And that's just, it's good to be skeptical.
Amen. Well, we have about 5 minutes left. A lot of great questions. So unfortunately, this one's going to have to be the last one. But it's from David Fleming, who also earlier in the chat, when you mentioned Vermont, said he's a Vermonter. So it's about blue states. So he asks, if you had to bet, what blue state do you think has the best chance of passing any form of school choice in 2025? If a few blue states pass school choice, would it be more difficult to brand school choice as a Republican policy? So what's the future looking like for, the other half for blue states for school choice?
Yeah. So I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know which blue state's going to be first. My focus right now is the red states that haven't gone universal already. We're leaning in there. And so but I don't think if a blue state passes school choice, it's not going to turn off conservatives, right? It's going to be conservatives within the blue state leading the charge, and then a few Democrats coming along, right? So it'll still be like a conservative, and then just theoretically, it's still a conservative issue if the left is more likely to control the government schools and their curriculum. It's still the conservatives that disproportionately benefit from the policy. But either way, if a blue state passes school choice tomorrow, look, the RNC just passed universal school choice as being on their national platform. They're not going to say, oh, we can't do that anymore because the Democrats are doing it. I think they're going to have open arms, and it'll only be helpful in my view. But I don't know which blue state will be the first to do so. Look, we had Illinois. Maybe we get Illinois back, but I don't know. I don't. The Illinois program, what's interesting about Illinois was that it was actually passed with a Democrat legislature like 5-7 years ago, and they had a Republican governor. There was a deal made between the Democrat legislature and the Republican governor who fought hard for it. And, I think that part of the deal was this sunset where it automatically went away after a few years. And so that's part of the problem as to why the program's gone. The Democrats probably knew they would never save the program. They'd let it exist for a little bit. It's just insane how they're ripping scholarships away from low-income families. I'm looking at my map right now. I can't really tell you the low-hanging fruit of blue states. I will say some ways to do it. They tried this in California. One, they figured, well, we can circumvent the union-controlled legislature by putting it on the ballot. It's a popular issue. Maybe the voters will pass it. They needed like 500,000 signatures. They didn't get enough. So that didn't happen in California. In Kentucky, they put it on the ballot because we actually lost in the courts there, which ridiculous court decision. We usually win. But it's going to be on the November ballot in Kentucky. That'll be interesting to look at because the unions can organize really well. And even if school choice polls really high, you might still lose on the ballot if the unions are controlling the airwaves and they're paying for a lot of ads against the proposition. The people might already have their mind made about the proposition before they even get to the ballot box to read the initiative. So we'll see what happens in Kentucky, but that's one way to try to get around the union-controlled legislature in blue states. We also have the Federal Educational Choice for Children Act. This is a tax credit mechanism where you can supercharge the school choice already happening in red states while bringing it to blue states like California, where families can get a tax benefit at the federal level for K-12 private education expenses. So I think that might be a step in the right direction. And I just wrote about it, the New York Post. We have 151 co-sponsors in the House, including Speaker Mike Johnson, and we have 31 co-sponsors in the Senate. So if Trump wins, it looks like he's going to, that might be a real conversation going forward. But at the end of the day, federal education expenditures, it's only about 8% of the total. So you still get your biggest bang for your buck at the state level. So this might be a short-term assist in blue states, but at the end of the day, we need to reach escape velocity for it to happen where it matters the most at the state level in blue states too. Maybe the blue states will become red states in some cases if they lose on the issue of school choice, but not an easy question to answer. But Gary, and I saw that you heard about 10 seconds too. I'm guessing Gary grew up in Texas. I don't know if he actually did, but
yes, he's based in Texas.
Yeah, so I had a story about Texas before we get off real quick. I actually live in San Antonio, and I'm joining the parent revolution really soon, by the way. My wife is in her 3rd trimester, and we're joining on the front lines as foot soldiers with all of you, as opposed to just being in general. But we have a really good school district right next to us called Alamo Heights. By the way, we're not sending our kid to Caesar. We're homeschooling. That's part of the plan. But if we did, that there is this Alamo Heights school district right next to us. And I had heard whispers about they were charging tuition for out-of-district students. And so I emailed them saying, how much does it cost? We're on the other side of the boundary to send our kid to your school. $10,300 a year, in addition to what you're already paying in property taxes for your school that you don't use. And so this same district lobbied the Texas legislature last year saying that they're against it because the voucher might not cover full tuition when they charge tuition, total hypocrites. And then also private schools don't take all kids. And I looked into their transfer applications. They don't take all kids either. You have to have the right test scores. You have to have the right disciplinary records. Each year you have to reapply. So if you have a discipline policy from one year to the next, they can kick you out. Just total hypocrisy on full display. But I believe that there's a lot of other districts in Texas doing the same thing. So Don't call them public schools. They're government schools.
Yes, that's a good note to end on, motivating that we've seen lots of victories, but there's much more fights to be had. Thank you so much, Corey. Thank you everyone for joining us. The first 25 of you who registered, Young Voices will be sending you a copy of Corey's book, so you'll be receiving an email soon about that. We are so pleased to have you. This recording will be up on our website too, if you want to share it with anyone in the coming days, and be on the lookout for a future Young Voices Forum invitation. We're going to have one in August with Alexander Hammond, formerly of the Cato Institute, to talk about his new book about human progress. So looking forward. I hope everyone has a wonderful summer, and talk soon. Have a great one.